Welcome to another edition of Just a Voice on Main Street. I'm Gary Sutton, where we talk to people here in the York area and around the area that are interesting to you and to me. And one of those guys is here with me today, Tim Barker, who's the District Attorney of York County. He has been in law for a long time. I'll let him talk about what a long time is and define that. But Tim Barker with us this morning, District Attorney of York County. Mr. District Attorney, great to have you with us here on Just a Voice on Main Street.
Thanks so much, Gary. It's great to be here.
So I want to go back. A lot of people know you now as a district attorney, and of course you're stepping in for Dave Sunday, who moved on to attorney general. But you've been around York and you've been around the law for a long, long time. Give people a little bit of background on who you are, where you came from, and how you got into this crazy job of being a lawyer here and eventually being a district attorney here in York County.
Sure. So I first came here back as a prosecutor 27 years ago. So I started March 16th of 1998. I remember the day well because it's also my mom's birthday. So I can never forget mom's birthday.
No, never.
And so how I wound up working in this field, I was working as a law clerk for a judge who they actually have named statewide award after, Judge Linda K.M. Ledgate in Berks County. And she did primarily criminal law, very involved in innovations, looking at different things that way. And one of the aspects that really struck me is how much I loved the Constitution and how much I wanted to be involved in constitutional law. I had really specialized in that from college through law school, very much appreciated all the aspects of that. And I was advised criminal law really is where you have the most hands-on approach to constitutional law and the protection of our constitutional freedoms. So while I was in working as a law clerk, there were people that were saying to me, if you really love constitutional law and constitutional affairs, then you want to become a defense attorney. I said, well, why is that? We elect a DA, we hire prosecutors to work for government to protect society and to protect the Constitution and to defend our laws and the constitutional freedoms that we all have. And they're like, well, prosecutors, they primarily just care about convictions. Defense attorneys actually protect people's freedoms. And I remembered saying to myself in my mind, well, that's completely messed up. That's not how we should be. And so maybe it was me being in my 20s. I'm like, well, and I have to become a prosecutor because we need people to go ahead and fight for these things that are on that side of the coin and not just as defense attorneys. So I wound up looking to work as a prosecutor. I had many, many great experiences in York County with one of my best friends living here and my cousin marrying somebody from here, been at so many things, loved York County. And I applied and I was hired by Stan Rebert. And that started a 27-year journey as a prosecutor. And, I can't imagine life having turned out any differently. The sense of public service and how important it is for what you do, that's what keeps me going every day. And seeing how that has expanded through the years, away from just the traditional notion when I started of, we're reactionary, hand us the file, what are we doing in an individual case within these confines, to the proactive aspect of truly embracing. We are leaders, county leaders in public safety and community well-being. We're relied upon to go ahead and utilize our knowledge and influence to lift everyone up throughout our county.
Let me ask you a question.
Sure.
As you look at your talents over the years, and you've had about 27 years now to develop those in the role that you're in now and the role as an assistant, what do you think the greatest talent is that you bring to the law in terms of how you deal with it, looking back on it now?
That's a great question because it evolved. So when I started, the greatest talent that I brought, and still is an incredible strength of mine, was thirst for really knowing, understanding, and upholding the law. And I was always looked at as being an expert in so many different areas, not of just constitutional criminal law, but if we had a complex legal issue, you could give it to me, I'll figure it out, and I'll design it. As time went on applying that into litigation, I became a real expert at complex litigation, not only on appeal, where I originally started out, but also at trial. And because I was always really good at seeing where do facts line up with law. And if the facts prove the elements, one of the things I was always encouraged to do by Stan, then Tom, and also Dave went through the same exact system and training, is if it's fair and just, if the facts meet the law, then do it, go for it, regardless of whether or not it's easy. If all you're focused on is conviction rates, you're never going to do the right thing.
Right.
And so that was how it started. But along the way, I realized as well, and we used to talk about how complex concepts of justice and public safety are. And that led into now what I think is really a great strength of mine is problem solving complex issues in government, in representing people, in public safety, and how we innovate. I've been at the forefront of helping to create, through collaboration and partnership, some of the greatest innovations in criminal justice that have directly led to our over 30% decrease in crime, our huge reductions in recidivism. We are the best county that you're going to find for reducing recidivism rates. There's a new study just coming out that we actually improved our reductions in 22 and 23, studying those years, compared to 16 and 17. We went and we reduced it by over 50%.
What did you do? Now, what are the biggest things you could attribute that to as you look at during that time and you say, that's pretty big, 30%.
Yeah.
So, what can you point to a couple of things that were really hallmarks of that change?
Yes, and it began little by little. So we bottomed out as a county in terms of our crime rates and in terms of what was going on, our incarceration rates, supervision loads, caseload rates, crime rates. In the arena, I'd say of the area of 2011 through 2014, with 2013 really being a year where we had a lot of issues. And in 2013, and I do not say this lightly, I think the first step that happened was done by Mayor Kim Bracey. That was the year that she began the prayers for peace. And a lot of people forgot when she called for there to be prayers at all of the entryways to York City to pray for peace. They have been doing that every month ever since.
Really? I did
Yes.
not know that. Yeah, it's a really interesting fact.
And when I went to the 10-year anniversary of it, they didn't realize all the success we were having in terms of our reduction in crime and our reduction in violence. They did not know all of that. We have not done the great job that we need to in making sure that all of this information is out there.
Right.
We've done all right, but not a great job. So I cite to that first because of my strong Christian faith, Christian beliefs, and what I believe is the power of prayer. And it doesn't happen overnight, it happens over time.
Right.
But what began to happen as well is you began to continue to get individuals at the right places in our systems who were all looking at what can we do better. And I think our first area where we really cracked through what's a new way to look at things was in the area of DUI crime. And that was when we created the Target 25 Supervised Bail Initiative. That was our first early intervention, disruption of addiction type of initiative. And our success from that became really apparent over the course of not only the first year we began to see reductions in repeat offender DUI and reductions in victims of DUI crime, but when we hit year 2, we had over a 10% reduction in victims of DUI crime. Wow. And we've continued now. This is going on for well over a decade. We've continued to hold those low rates. And that was really where we saw, okay, if we come together as a collaborative, if we devote to what is data showing us, and data defeats ideology and biases.
Just is. I mean, it's sitting right there for you.
It just is. And especially if you go with it through purity. I mean, we all know the great Mark Twain line that there's lies, damn lies, and statistics.
Right.
So you can manipulate things to fit an ideology. But we went into it saying, no, nobody will. We did this massive audit of all DUI cases from 2010. And we came out with this result. We all agreed to it, and we've had great success. So as we went forward, we continued to say, all right, well, let's continue to look at this approach. That led to us starting our Reentry Coalition in 2016, revitalizing our crisis intervention teams in 2014. And it led to all of these little things occurring at the same time that we're starting. We had evidence-based practices approaches going on in probation. We just continued to expand little by little. And when you hit then 2018, so Dave takes office, we have leadership people in all kinds of different positions. These collaboratives are all started. I'm working as part of leadership in all these different collaboratives, and there you go. Everything just one after the other continued to take off like a rocket ship.
So a whole lot of little pieces, seemingly little pieces, but weren't little at all, come together to make a rather large result. You know, something you told me one time, we were talking, off air here, obviously. You said something about loving people, and it really stuck out to me because, you don't think about a prosecuting attorney, a DA, loving people. But you said there's a place for that in this whole process, even for people that you're prosecuting. Talk about that a little bit, because I thought that was a really unique approach.
Sure. The most important thing we can do is love one another. I fully believe that. Again, my faith is incredibly strong in me, and quite frankly, it's needed to be. When you're looking at everything that goes on around, it's very easy to go ahead and be thrown into depths of despair. I'm not saying this like this is not at all woe is me, can you believe what I've seen or anything. This is just fact. Like most of my career, I've looked at people killing people, assaulting people, sexually assaulting people, hurting children, hurting the elderly, doing things like that. So you can become extremely jaded. You can go ahead and you can write off that there's good in society. You can just accept that, well, people do bad things to people. What can you do? And have that all frame your mindset. At some point in time, you have to decide who you are. And for me, what I needed to get through all of these things, including in my own personal life, when one of my oldest and dearest friends was murdered in another county in 2000, while I was working as a prosecutor and prosecuting homicides. And it let me understand when victims say, I feel like I don't have control. Well, I understood firsthand what it means to not have control.
Right.
I'm a prosecutor and I have zero control in what's occurring to people I love in another county. I pushed further into my faith. And one of the things that is so critically important is love and sacrificial love. God is love. Love is what Jesus Christ preached.
Right.
And sacrificial love was what he taught. I think that right now, more than ever before, we must talk about love and sacrificial love. If you truly believe in accountability and redemption, you heard Dave talk about that a lot. I talk about that a lot. What accountability and redemption really is Micah 6:8. Act justly, love mercy, walk humbly with your God. And you are to love mercy. That means loving, not liking, but loving other individuals for their betterment, their well-being, so that we all rise together as people. So when we're looking at a case that comes in, and I've even had this happen, and people sometimes are like, how can you really do this?
Right.
It's a horrible murder case. How can you shake the hand of that defendant that you're asking a jury to go ahead and sentence to death? And I always felt that when we were going to those proceedings, it was very important for me to at least offer a hand, because if I didn't, then it meant it was personal. and it meant that I don't believe in eternal redemption of the soul. And it means that I am saying, I want you to be eternally condemned. I don't want you, even up to your deathbed, to be able to repent sins and say, I look for a home in eternity with Jesus Christ. Yeah. And which means then I'm not a Christian, and I didn't believe in love, and I didn't believe in that God is love. So we have to look at things that way. Now, that doesn't mean that we don't hold people accountable.
Right.
Every day, I go ahead and make decisions on people spending the rest of their life behind bars for the protection of society. And every day I make judgment calls on what is appropriate for individuals that absolutely require harsh treatments based upon the crimes committed and the overall community well-being and protection of society.
But you're saying it's possible then to do both, which is rather
Yes.
interesting. That's a very deep answer. You're known as a guy who is always very well prepared. You have a reputation for that. You do your homework. Have you ever gone into a case where you've gone through the case and you had doubts about it? When you got deep in the case, you said, I'm not sure. I've done all this preparation, everything. But what do you do if you're a lawyer and you're in that situation, particularly if you're a lawyer who's a prosecuting a lawyer? I've often heard people say, you never ask a question you don't know the answer to. I wonder if you go into a case that you don't kind of know the answer to, or what do you do in that kind of situation? I think a lot of people out there would be really interested in knowing what you look at as a district attorney there.
So I have had that happen. Now, if I'm not convinced beyond a reasonable doubt, I dismiss the case. I move for a null pros. And I have had cases where I was convinced beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant did it, but there was a gap in the evidence that I knew, and you only get one opportunity at this, right, that we were probably not going to be able to prove the case beyond a reasonable doubt due to some gaps that further investigation may be able to help us out. So what I did was I withdrew the charges for us to bring it back eventually should we get that extra evidence. But the scariest thing that you can confront is actually convicting an innocent person. Right. That almost happened to me in a case. And it was a case that did get quite a bit of notoriety where charges were filed and everything was lining up that the individual charged was the one who committed the crime.
Right.
But there were a couple of questions around the side that were nagging questions. But again, the evidence was clearly sufficient beyond a reasonable doubt. Here it turned out that one of the key witnesses was giving false evidence. The alibi that he was trying to claim, that there were documents that were not accurate. It did not support his alibi. So he didn't have one really that could be verified at all. And it took, in Baltimore, the individual who committed the crime up here in York committed another similar crime in Baltimore. And when he was caught by the police, he said, I was wondering when police were coming to get me because I killed a person in York County. Now, he didn't actually kill the person. The person lived, but he committed a similar crime. That individual, when he said that, we further took a look. That person actually committed the crime up here. We immediately dismissed the charge up here. We actually charged the person who gave false information with giving false information. And that's why you always keep working. If there's advancements in technology, you always get those advancements in technology. It's why you always have to carefully scrutinize everything. And the other thing that you need to do as well is always challenge your theories of the case. So I'll never forget one time, prosecutor who nationally in a very high profile case was talking about doing a retrial of a case where an individual was originally tried, convicted, went to, got a death sentence, and then was cleared by DNA. They found the person that actually did it, tried that person, convicted him on the second trial. The prosecutor that did the second trial said everyone wanted to come to immediately nefarious means on the part of the original prosecution team. He said, that's not what happened. And this is the way that most things in life, by the way, turn out. It's not mean, malicious, evil intent. Usually what happens is we wind up getting tunnel vision. And when things wind up fitting into the narratives, you make everything fit into the narratives without questioning them.
Self-fulfilling prophecies.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's a similar thing to when a lot of times we'll say that person meant to do a bad job in government, when in fact, no, they were incompetent in government. There's a difference between intending bad and just not being good at your job. It's the same thing with, you can wind up, and this can happen to everybody involved in the system, where you can go ahead and all the pieces are lining up in the narrative and they do fit this. And that person they originally prosecuted in that high profile case, the evidence all fit. It fit everything to line up with him. It's just,
Everything all looked right, except it wasn't him.
Yeah.
Final question. You are a custodian of your time as DA. Dave Sunday was a custodian of his time as DA. Tom Chambers was a custodian. Stan Riebert. Final question. What are you trying to do now to raise the DA's job, to raise the DA's office during this time, or to maintain that level of excellence? What's the number one thing that you're really considering, and the number one thing you think about doing on a daily basis?
Okay. So there's certain things that, from the maintaining standpoint, that are obvious maintaining characteristics. We will always be an office devoted to accountability and redemption. We are always going to be an office devoted to innovation and to trying to see what we can meaningfully do to advance public safety, community well-being, and fairness and justice. And I codified those three prongs as part of our platform and mission of our office. But the key is the expansion. We can never be settled with where we are. So my big point of expansion, I have some topic areas that are critical: domestic violence, juvenile justice, trafficking, large-scale drug trafficking, human trafficking, sex trafficking, elder abuse, and what we're doing in certain areas of elder abuse and child abuse, vulnerable populations. While we've done really good things in those areas, how do we expand further? And one of the things about reducing gun violence the way we have, it exposes your areas of other vulnerability that you haven't advanced as much in. How we do early intervention. Yeah, I know you and I have spoken a lot about early intervention, identifying where individuals belong in the system at the earliest point in time, continuing to expand that. But all of that goes to the larger issue of comprehensive community planning. How are we overall, with all of our governmental partners, all of our private partners, all of our nonprofits, our different service providers, how are we coming together to think about global interaction in access to care and access to all of the available services throughout this county that will increase public safety and community well-being? It's a global look of partnership with fiscal responsibility as well. One of the reasons why I talk about public safety saves money. Not only does it go ahead and improve and want people to invest here and work here and live here, but also by saving in this way, we reduced our prison population. That's over $57 million a year annually. Those are dollars then that can be reinvested and do not require tax increases. All that comes from specific global planning and how we work together to get early intervention for those where redemption must be the priority up front, and how we continue to keep accountable and to separate and incarcerate those individuals where we have to do that as well.
You've got a full plate there, Mr. District Attorney, but you've got a great plan, it sounds like, to get at that. And really appreciate you taking the time to be with us today and telling people a little bit about your job and who you are. I think it really was helpful today. And thanks for being a great voice on Main Street.
Thanks. I really appreciate it, Gary. Thank you very much.
Tim Barker, District Attorney of York County. Just a voice on Main Street, more than just a voice. They're making a difference out there, and he's making a difference with the District Attorney's office here in York County. Until next time, I'm Gary Sutton.